For a lot of people, OCD can seem like a very strange or unusual condition characterized by bizarre thoughts and weird, superstitious rituals or behaviors. But once you understand what's going on in OCD, it actually makes a lot of sense. In today's video, I'm going to be talking about how obsessions and compulsions work together to drive OCD. Hi everyone. In today's video, we're going to be talking about obsessive-compulsive disorder and a behavioral model for understanding how OCD works and how obsessions and compulsions come together to really drive and fuel OCD. Before I get into that, just a couple of disclaimers to go over. I'm a registered psychologist in the province of British Columbia, Canada, and this video is for informational purposes only. It is not intended as a substitute or replacement for advice from your doctor or mental health professional. Now, with those things out of the way, let's start talking about a model of OCD. So, in a previous video, I talked about what OCD is and the difference between obsessions and compulsions. Today, we're going to talk about how obsessions, which are those intrusive, unwanted thoughts or images or impulses, really fuel and drive the compulsions, which are the repetitive behaviors that are aimed to try and reduce the distress or the impact of the obsessions. So I want you to think about an example. So, for example, I'm driving my car one day, and I'm driving out on the road, and I feel a bump in the road. And when I feel that bump in the road, I start to think to myself, did I just hit somebody? What if I just hit somebody with my car? Well, how do you think that's going to make me feel if I had the thought or had the belief that I just hit somebody with my car and they might be lying on the side of the road, hurt or potentially dying? Well, that's probably going to cause a fair bit of distress or anxiety for me. So I'm going to feel really anxious. So if I'm feeling really anxious, that's an uncomfortable feeling to have. So I'm going to want to do something to try and eliminate that anxiety. So what am I likely to do? Well, I'm likely to drive my car around the block and come and see if I actually hit somebody, if there is somebody actually hit and hurt on the side of the road. This is actually a very common thing that happens in OCD and a very common type of process that occurs. So with OCD, you usually have some sort of trigger. So in the example that I just gave, the trigger situation is that I felt a bump as I was driving. That trigger leads to the intrusive thought. This is the obsession, right? And so the obsessions are these unwanted, intrusive thoughts, images, or impulses. Well, as I talked about in the example, the obsession is associated with anxiety. So when I have these thoughts that I just hit somebody with my car, or my hands are contaminated because I touched that doorknob, or I saw a pretty woman and I thought about kissing her, and so that must mean I want to have an affair, and that causes anxiety. So these obsessions all trigger this anxiety and this fear about the obsession. And so when I'm feeling really anxious, what I want to do is I have this urge to neutralize, or an urge to try and eliminate or reduce that anxiety or distress. And the way I do it is by engaging in the compulsion. So in the example, the compulsion was to go around the block and to check to see if I had hurt somebody. If my hands are contaminated, the compulsion might be to go and wash my hands. If the obsession was around having cheated on my wife because I thought about having an affair with somebody, then the compulsion might be to repeatedly tell my wife how much I love her, or the compulsion might be to repeatedly remind myself about why I would never do something like that. So these compulsions are designed to reduce or eliminate the anxiety. And the compulsions have kind of two phases of effect. In the short term, this compulsive behavior, this urge to neutralize an associated compulsion, what it does is it actually eliminates the anxiety. So if I've touched something and I feel my hands are contaminated, I go and I wash my hands. Well, what's that going to do to my anxiety? It's going to reduce my anxiety in the short term. And a reduction in anxiety feels good. So that behavior is going to be reinforced. When I go back and I check and I see that I haven't hit anybody with my car, that's going to reduce my anxiety. That's going to feel good. So the idea is the compulsions are actually reinforced by the reduction in the anxiety that's associated by doing the compulsion. So in the short term, compulsions really work. But the key is short term. The reduction in anxiety that comes by doing these compulsions doesn't actually last. And in fact, it can be extremely fleeting. So I can feel my hands are contaminated, I go wash my hands, but then as I start walking away from the sink, I can get another intrusive thought of, did I really wash my hands? Did I wash my hands well enough? So what do I have to do then? I have to go back and I have to wash my hands again. And I walk away. Well, did I really wash them? Did I wash all the soap off? I have to go back and wash them again. So while the compulsions can help reduce the anxiety and the distress in the short term, what they do is they actually fuel the intrusive thoughts, because I'm behaving like the intrusive thoughts are actually valid or a real concern. And the anxiety and the distress that comes down by engaging in the compulsions actually reinforces the compulsions. So every time I have the intrusive thought, I have to engage in these compulsions, because that's how I learn. And that's what I've learned is the best way to reduce the anxiety. So these compulsions have sort of two effects. In the short term, they reduce my anxiety, but in the long term, they actually fuel the intrusive thoughts and keep the anxiety and the OCD going. Additionally, this urge to neutralize and the engaging in the compulsions, which is designed to eliminate the distress that's caused by the intrusive thought, well, by eliminating the distress, what I'm trying to do, I'm trying to neutralize the thought. I'm trying to eliminate the thought. I'm trying to stop thinking about the thought. And this is something we call thought suppression. And I've talked about what I've referred to as the paradox of thought suppression in a number of previous videos. And I've used an example of trying not to think about a pink elephant. The more you try not to think about a pink elephant, the more you end up thinking about a pink elephant. And so the more you try and eliminate or neutralize these thoughts, the more you try and convince yourself that you didn't hit somebody with a car, the more you're going to question and doubt whether or not you've hit somebody in the car. And so it becomes this self-driving engine of obsessive thoughts leading to anxiety, leading to this urge to neutralize and have to engage in a compulsion, which reduces the anxiety very briefly for a short period of time, but then fuels that intrusive thought And this cycle just drives and drives and drives. And that's what pushes the engine of OCD forward. And that's why a person can't stop having these intrusive thoughts. That's why a person can't stop engaging in these compulsive behaviors, because the OCD has taught them that this is the only way to deal with these thoughts, and that you have to engage in the compulsions to reduce the distress that the thoughts cause. So when you understand it, it makes a lot of sense. And it helps explain why these obsessions and compulsions, even though they may seem so bizarre and seem so unusual that a person would have to engage in these types of behaviors and thinking patterns, but it actually makes a lot of sense if you understand that the obsessions are intrusive thoughts that cause anxiety, and the compulsions are a person's desperate attempt to try and eliminate the anxiety and to try to eliminate the thoughts. So it's really important to understand this model of OCD, because the treatment that we talk about for OCD, specifically exposure and response prevention, comes directly from this understanding of how OCD works. And I'll be talking about exposure and response prevention in an upcoming video. So I hope that makes sense. I would love to hear your thoughts and questions about this. So please leave me some comments in the comments section down below. If you've been enjoying my videos and would like to see more, please hit that subscribe button and notification bell, and you'll be alerted every week when I post a new video. It also really helps me out a lot, because it helps get these videos and promote these videos out so that other people can see them. So that's all for today. Thank you for making it all the way to the end of this video, and I will see you in the next one.